welcome to the Cutting Edge podcast. My name is Nabeela Vally and I look after business development for Edge Growth. As you know, impact investing is a growing buzzword in many circles in South Africa, and it's gained traction globally as a viable investment option that generates positive, measurable and sustainable environmental impact and at the same time financial return for investors. Given the infancy of the concept in South Africa, we thought it's important to unpack just exactly what impact investing means and what's been happening on the ground. Joining me today is an esteemed guest and an authority on impact investing. She is a Vice President Program Officer at Global Philanthropy. My guest, Colleen Ebbitt, has oversight for philanthropic grants supporting more inclusive economic growth in South Africa, Sweden, Turkey, and France, and ultimately is a specialist in small business development. Colleen, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I realized I would not do your background and your career any justice, so I wanted to start off understanding what your journey in impact investing has been and why, and what makes you stick to small business development.
Oh, great. Well, I started my career in traditional banking and wealth management. So I was a private banker for JP Morgan, working on managing wealth and assets, investments, and even lending for wealthy families, foundations, et cetera. And it was really interesting just to see people's goals, but then also separately how people thought quite separately about their philanthropic impact as donation. But then I think around 2011, JP Morgan launched with Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, a private equity fund called the Global Health Investment Fund. And that was investing in late stage pharmaceuticals to get drugs into people's hands that need it at very low price points for things that they shouldn't be dying from. And that was the first time I saw this merger of, philanthropy almost making a societal impact in addition to investments. And so that's when I knew, okay, I have to find out more, do more in this space. So I became a coach for social entrepreneurs, but never quite got my fix. I was just so interested in working in impact investment, and it's not a place where you can volunteer. Like you can volunteer at a charity. You can't just knock on a door of an investment house and say, can I come in and volunteer with you?
Absolutely.
So I took a fellowship, a year sabbatical actually, from my finance job to work for LGT Impact Ventures. And they would take professionals and put them into impact investments that they had made, which one was to a maternal HIV/AIDS health organization here in South Africa called Mothers to Mothers. And I helped them on a social impact bond, which was a new way of financing their types of interventions. And it was a wonderful experience. And from that point, I knew I could never go back to traditional banking. I was, going to stay the path. And so then I moved to London, England, where social impact investment is really thriving, whether you're a social business, an investor, public policy, everyone's kind of mobilized around this space. And I worked for the UK government as a senior policy advisor on social impact investment, and was also Prime Minister Theresa May's policy lead on social enterprises. So it was a really rich experience. And then rejoined JP Morgan 2 years ago in their foundation that focuses on inclusive economic growth. And really happy to be working back here in South Africa amongst other countries.
Absolutely. I think when you actually see that there's a world where you can make meaningful change and at the same time create financial return for your impact investors, it's like, I can't go back to doing what I was doing before, right?
Yeah. And I think you see a lot of people kind of in this pursuit of a purposeful life. And that's been a really fulfilling part of my career, is that, it is a job at the end of the day, but it's also a personal passion. And I feel like I am making some small change or difference for the better.
So you obviously joined JP Morgan, you rejoined JP Morgan under the philanthropy division, and they're focused on driving equitable and inclusive economy. And you do this through initiatives such as Small Business Forward. But I'd like to unpack what impact investing means for JP Morgan. What does it mean, and how are some of the projects that you've undertaken and endeavored in, how is impact investing reflected through in those projects?
So at JP Morgan, we know that every single investment has an impact. And so one of the things that we're doing right now is making sure that we're integrating ESG across all of our how we assess all of our investments that we make as a firm. So what is the environmental, the social, the governance impact? And that's a really major undertaking that all financial services firms are doing, because measuring is great, but getting access to good quality data is a really important aspect of that, so that you know what the true impact to society or the environment is of these investments. JP Morgan's also recently made a really important commitment of $2.5 trillion over the next 10 years to really drive climate change and facilitating and financing those deals. And then from a mission standpoint, we're really focused on inclusive economic growth. So when we look at what our foundation or corporate responsibility does in impact investments or even philanthropic donations, we are impact first. So our first lens is, are we driving inclusive economic growth? Are we helping people to access jobs that would otherwise struggle? Are we helping small businesses that are underserved entrepreneurs to get the skills that they need to grow and thrive? And are we helping vulnerable households to either increase their savings or decrease their debt to withstand financial shocks and build their own financial resilience? So really an impact first lens to some of what we do. And then the more traditional banking part is really trying to work with clients, et cetera, to understand what the impact is and balancing that with risk and return.
So that leading with impact lens has obviously, you've worked across a number of industries and countries across the globe, and I'd like to get a sense of what are the trends you're seeing in impact investing across the world, and any themes coming out, any models that are worth noting in the South African space as well.
Yeah, I think one of the spaces that's really large for impact investing is housing, social housing. So you can imagine when you have something that's asset-backed, it's a little bit de-risked, right? So there is some bricks and mortar there, but you know you're creating substantial impact by driving towards more affordable housing and accommodation, or supporting those that might struggle to access certain types of accommodation, more maybe disabled, those that struggle from complex needs, that struggle to access that housing. So that is a really big trend that we've seen in impact investment globally. Is a lot of it is rooted in this asset-backed or housing.
Okay.
I think what you're seeing more and more now is more tools and ways to finance different social impact, or to finance businesses that are trying to drive an impact.
Okay.
So it doesn't just have to be debt or equity. You see quasi-equity, you see even revenue-based financing. So there's a lot of different tools now that are coming available. Outcomes-based contracts, social impact bonds. So the world of impact investing is really diverse. And I think we're going to continue to see more and more innovations in this space, because it's not a one-size-fits-all of what anybody needs to grow. It's not just debt or equity. It's is it affordable? Is it accessible?
100%.
What types of terms does it have, et cetera?
And does it take into consideration the context of, the entrepreneurs that you're helping to build? Because oftentimes that's what we're seeing. I think the one thing that I wanted to touch on was, in terms of legislation, have you seen globally legislation that helps catalyze impact investing, or actually give it a boost that's needed?
Absolutely. So I worked for the UK government, which really, I would say from 2000 started to look at what is the role of government in trying to drive inclusive economic growth. And what their starting position was at the UK government was, there is no way that government alone could solve these social challenges. It will take public sector, private sector, social sector, and even academia to come together to work on these solutions. So how do you initiate that, or try to drive that? And so some of the things they led on were social investment tax relief. Can you make it more attractive for investors to invest their money into social investments by offering tax relief? That mobilized demand. In terms of the supply of capital, they created Big Society Capital, which is a wholesale investment bank. So they didn't just say, okay, we're going to set up an impact investor. They said, no, we need to find someone that impact investors can go to access that capital, so that they can on-lend and invest either equity or debt into social enterprises. And that actually, where that money came from was a piece of legislation called the Dormant Assets Scheme. And that allowed for dormant bank accounts in the UK that had been dormant for more than 15 years. Nobody had come to reclaim these, to take a portion of that, manage it, And then some of it, they would move into social impact investment. And that's how they funded the first social investment bank. Japan has now done a similar model. Portugal's looking to do something similar. And then, of course, social impact bonds is another way that government can try to encourage public sector to consider impact investment as a way to pay for good outcomes. This is all coming from like government grants, a lot of this innovation. So we know that legislation and public policy plays a really important role.
Absolutely. And I think, it's a number of moving parts that all come together in actually enabling. One part is legislation, and the other part is where are the immediate needs in which we need to solve? And you touched on it earlier in terms of asset-backed financing and stuff like that. But are there other trends that you've seen? For example, green economy or woman-focused entrepreneurs?
Yes, I mean both of those actually. So gender lens investing is something that's really taking off, and diversity and inclusion is something that's also really now coming to the forefront of assessing investments that people make. So that comes back into this ESG and understanding who is the board, who is the founder, who are the employees, and understanding that diverse profile. We're not there yet. There's so much to be done in terms of like gender and diverse impact investing. We know where the capital goes, and it doesn't go there. So that needs to change. But sustainable investment is huge. Everybody's thinking about what is your impact on people and planet, and that is going to be a real driving force. And then you also again are seeing pieces of legislations, Paris climate agreements, things that are mobilizing all the different actors, government, private sector, et cetera, to start considering what more can we do to manage ourselves and our firm in a different way, and what also are we reporting back, and what are the investments that we make, et cetera.
Absolutely. So, and you've worked in South Africa for a number of years now, and I think the first question that I'd like to settle is Cape Town or Joburg?
Oh no!
Pick one. or you reserve to comment.
Okay. Well, first let me start with a compliment. I am here during Jacaranda season. So Johannesburg is absolutely beautiful at the moment. So Jacaranda season. It is the sea of purple and green. It is so beautiful.
It is.
And it's a business hub. It's thriving. It's fast-paced. And so that's really exciting from a work standpoint. And to be honest, most of my work and investments are here in Gauteng area.
Cool.
And it's where JP Morgan's headquarters are. So, that is where our mind is. But my heart's always going to be in Cape Town. That's the first place that I lived in South Africa. And, just worked so closely with such an incredible organization in HIV/AIDS, and was just really captured by the beauty of Cape Town. But the spirit of South Africa is something that I just wish that everybody could experience, from the culture, the music, the colors, the people, the food. I mean, it is really just such a culturally rich and wonderful place to be. And I think for me, it's easy to understand why this is the cradle of humanity.
Absolutely. And so, like in your work in South Africa, maybe let's chat about what you've seen in the impact investing space in South Africa. Are we just playing lip service to impact investing, or are there good things happening on the ground when it comes to impact investing? Yeah.
So first of all, I don't want to suggest that I'm a resident expert on social impact investment in South Africa, but I do think that you are seeing, again, South Africans are very innovative, and they are open to working together. So one of the things I thought was really exciting that JP Morgan did was to look at what can we do to try to solve the issues of access to finance for small businesses, and particularly to drive Black business growth here in South Africa. And we worked with the government, Department of Trade, to launch the Abadali Equity Equivalency Investment Program, which is going to make a real difference actually through partners here at Edge Growth and profit share partners to unlock lending, short-term and mid-term lending for those that would otherwise struggle to get it. That's an important piece of the landscape, is that impact investing shouldn't just be impact investors. You should have banks that are traditional banks also thinking about that space. So everybody needs to start thinking about what more can we do to unlock finance or answers to social challenges. So that's really exciting that JP Morgan really spent many years actually trying to create this opportunity. When I was working down in South Africa in 2015, or here in South Africa, but in Cape Town, I was working on the first social impact investment bond in the emerging markets. So that was really exciting. So you'd seen a lot of it in developed countries, in the UK, some starting to pick up in the United States, but it is really an interesting tool for public sector to trial really interesting innovations, have private investors make that investment, someone lead on that innovation. If it works, government pays back the investor. So that means government's only paying for what works. Government doesn't typically like to pay for things that don't work, so that's what stifles some investment in innovation or R&D, et cetera. And then you have institutions like university institutions that are really focused on this. You have a lot of business support organizations that are seeing this increased demand coming from social entrepreneurs that are creating solutions. So I think the environment's ripe in South Africa to see more of this. And the issues are there. We know the issues are there.
100%,
So I think it's an exciting time to be working in the impact investing space.
It is, and I think what I'm sensing is also the key is collaboration and a collaboration across multiple sectors and industries. And one of the things that we've had in South Africa is the broad-based Black economic empowerment legislation. And I'd like to get a sense of what you think around, has enterprise and supply development or BBBE played a role in impact investing and helping it just grow?
Absolutely. It goes back again to government being a powerful driver, and reward can incentivize behavior. And creating the broad-based Black economic empowerment scorecard meant that every corporate was going to have to adhere to these standards and be rated on that. And what does that mean? It would actually impact you from a business standpoint of how much business you can do here in South Africa. So that created a really strong impetus to start supporting Black business growth. But the capital didn't immediately follow to invest in these businesses. And after 40 years of apartheid, et cetera, it's not so let's see, that ended in 1994. BE legislation was what, 2003, 2008?
Yeah, first of it was 97, but
So it takes a long time to actually create a market when you've had such disadvantage and oppression and the system wasn't fair and it wasn't working fairly.
Absolutely.
So it's going to take a lot of time. Unfortunately, probably generations even. But eventually we'll get there, and I think that this will be one of the key tools that unlocked that, civil society effort to try to create a more fair and just society here in South Africa.
And it forces, focus on issues or challenges that entrepreneurs are facing in a South African context.
Absolutely. Skills development, ownership,
supplier development,
enterprise development. Like the scorecard is really designed around those critical issues, but things that can unlock the potential. It's not about I think working in philanthropy or impact investment, it feels like everyone's always talking about the problems and the issues, and really it's about the opportunities, and it's about unlocking the potential.
Absolutely.
And that I think the scorecard's certainly well designed around that. I'm not saying it's a perfect model. I think there are some other aspects to it that can. It's not the end all be all for what's going to make South Africa the most inclusive economy.
Absolutely.
So you have a lot of foreigners that arrive here in South Africa that need to integrate into the economy as well. And BE scorecard is specific to South African citizens. So, it's not the only tool to create an inclusive economy here in South Africa.
Absolutely. But then we have organizations like JP Morgan looking at inclusive economies, and speaking from a lens of opportunity, what are you seeing in your work in South Africa through the philanthropy division as opportunities for impact investing?
So I think the opportunities for us, so we've really focused our inclusive economic growth across those three areas of jobs and skills training. So what are the jobs that are in demand here in South Africa? We see lots of green shoots of good opportunities in both digital and green economy jobs.
Okay.
So we're funding We Think Code to support more female software engineers here in Johannesburg.
Yeah.
We're funding our labs down in Cape Town for digital skills. We also look at very disadvantaged, so those that are even further removed from the formal sector, trying to connect them with opportunities in construction, looking at green construction.
Yeah.
So there are opportunities emerging, I would say, within the digital and green space, particularly for jobs and skills training. There is a lack of formal sector employment here in South Africa, and that is extremely difficult to reconcile when we used to think about our philanthropy as what's that one thing that we're trying to achieve with this? And that one thing was placements into formal sector employment. And when you have the shedding of formal sector jobs that you've seen over the last 18 months, unemployment for youth is now at 57% here in South Africa, the highest in the world. It's the most unequal country in the world. You can't just solve it with the formal economy. So looking at informal economy, I think is a really big opportunity here in South Africa.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of people that know side hustle and how to survive and how to figure something out. But could we do more to fine tune those skills so that they can create it into something a little bit more than a side hustle and maybe develop it into a business? So
and clustered economies and, you know, your township economies are growing all the time.
Absolutely. So we're working with Maharishi Institute to look at entrepreneurial skills for township economy and youth. We, of course, in our small business growth, we do a lot with township entrepreneurs. We fund the Black Umbrella's Soweto Incubator. And then we fund a lot of different programs, and I see a lot of opportunities in the green space again. So we've announced our Fatola Circular Economy Accelerator Partnership, which is going to be, you know, an 18-month accelerator for those green and sustainable businesses to get access to supply chains, to really grow and scale so that they can get big contracts, hire, employ more people, and really kind of drive towards what South Africa is looking for from a low carbon emission and becoming more green and sustainable. Those would be some of the things that I see.
Fantastic. I think, I mean, you know, there's so much to unpack in this space and so many things that we could learn from as well, from what's been done globally in the impact investing space. And I think to close, are there any lessons we should take note of, or any parting shots to impact investors in the space? Yeah,
I think there's so much more we could learn from the African and South African context. So a lot of information, research, and data is of these other markets, but the context here is really unique. Logistics are a struggle. There's a lot to consider. So, for example, if you want to invest in jobs and skills training programs, and you offer a young person an amazing opportunity to be invested in for 2 years, but they can't afford the bus fare. But they can't afford
the data. Exactly, the data.
To do virtual learning.
Or there's load shedding.
This is the South African reality, and then you look at the small businesses struggling to survive. And this is the cornerstone of the economy. This is where your job creation is going to come from, a small business. But you have load shedding, they don't have generators.
100%.
So what are you going to do? So I think that there's a lot we can learn from South Africa, in the global South, like the innovation that it takes to overcome these challenges is what makes it so exciting to work in impact investment here. Not because it's easy, but because it's hard.
Absolutely. So hard makes opportunity, right?
It does. So I think for me, that's something that's kind of really exciting about the world is reopening again. I can finally come back down here to South Africa and really learn from everyone here, and that innovation and that resilience is just really part of the South African spirit and economy.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity. And thank you for everything that you do.
Please remember to subscribe and like on any platform that you're watching, and drop a comment so that we can have further conversations. Thank you. Follow our podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, where we will be releasing a new episode every 2 weeks. Or subscribe to the Edge Growth YouTube channel to catch the conversation.